It was the chilly evening of New Year's Eve, 2023. My friend Martin asked me to take care of his dog, Buster, while he visited his family for the holidays. I'm 32 and not much for partying, so I agreed to look after Buster, a friendly golden retriever. Martin left early in the morning, reminding me to feed Buster and take him for walks. I planned to explore some new walking trails around the neighborhood to keep things interesting. I packed a bag with essentials for the overnight stay at Martin's place, a quaint house near the edge of town. Our friendship was recent, sparked by our mutual love for outdoor activities. I spent the day relaxing, reading, and playing fetch with Buster in the backyard. My girlfriend, Rachel, said she would join me later in the evening. Martin was cool with it and made a joke about keeping his house tidy. As dusk settled in, I decided to take Buster for a longer walk. We ventured into an unfamiliar part of the neighborhood, discovering a secluded path leading into a wooded area, part of the local nature reserve. The trail was narrow and surrounded by dense woods. It was quieter than the usual paths, with hardly anyone around. Buster seemed excited, tugging at his leash eagerly. Deep into our walk, we stumbled upon a small, abandoned park with an old swing set and a dilapidated basketball court. Buster pulled me toward the playground, barking at something hidden in the trees. I sat on a bench to catch my breath, but Buster was fixated on the woods. Suddenly, a man emerged from behind a tree, laughing awkwardly and saying, "You got me." I was taken aback and quickly led Buster away from him. The man's behavior was odd, and he started following us as we left the park. Buster growled and barked, clearly uneasy. I tried to ignore the man, but he persisted, claiming he just wanted to pet Buster. I declined his request and picked up my pace. I glanced back to see the man still trailing us, half hidden behind trees. A feeling of danger washed over me, and I began to run with Buster back toward the street. Once on the main road, I looked back to see we'd lost him. Relieved, I hurried back to Martin's house. Buster remained on edge, occasionally stopping to look back. That night, as the clock neared midnight, I heard a tapping at the window. Rachel and I were startled to see the same man from the woods standing outside, asking in a chilling voice if we knew what he was doing earlier. I called the police immediately, reporting the man's strange behavior and his appearance at the window. The dispatcher advised us to stay inside and call again if he returned. We spent a restless night, jumping at every sound. Thankfully, the man didn't come back. The next morning, I recounted the incident to Martin over the phone. He was as baffled as we were. We never found out who the man was or what his intentions were. The encounter left us with an unsettling feeling, especially on New Year's Eve. Since then, I've avoided walking in secluded areas, especially during the holidays. It was a warm summer night in 2013. I decided to take my dog, Max, for his usual evening walk. I typically follow the same path, but that night, I chose to explore a different street. This particular block was less familiar to me, except for one detail. It had an infamous house known locally as the Old Maple House. I had only seen it from a distance while driving past. The house always stood out for its dilapidated state, a stark contrast to the well-maintained homes around it. The town's reluctance to demolish it was a mystery, especially considering its grim past, a place where a tragic event involving a young couple had occurred. As Max and I walked closer, I could see the Old Maple House looming ahead. I planned to stop for a closer look. Max, sensing something, halted before I did, his attention fixed on the house. The neighboring properties were spread out, and the dense foliage provided a shield from prying eyes. The house sat in darkness, its facade hidden in the shadows between streetlights. Feeling adventurous, I stepped onto the overgrown lawn with Max, who was now growling softly. We approached an open window, and I peered inside, curious about the state of the house. Inside, it was dark, but not completely pitch black. I could make out the contours of an empty living room and a doorway leading to a back room. Suddenly, I heard a noise from deeper within the house, like something heavy falling. Emboldened by having Max with me, I decided to investigate further. The backyard was expansive and unkempt. An old, weathered shed stood in the corner, its door ajar. Max's attention was now fixed on the shed, his demeanor unusually quiet. I cautiously approached the shed, leading Max gently to keep him silent. As I peered inside, I saw not tools or garden equipment, but a young woman standing motionless in the center of the empty shed. Max erupted into a frenzy of barking, pulling away from the shed. The woman in the shed turned towards us, and in a panic, Max and I ran. We didn't stop until we were several blocks away, completely out of breath. Once home, I pondered the night's events. I had visited the old Maple House, infamous for a tragic past, and encountered a mysterious woman standing alone in an old shed. Whether she was a ghost, a remnant of the house's dark history, or just someone exploring like me, I couldn't say. But the encounter left me shaken, and I never walked that route again, especially at night. In the summer of 2014, when I was 11, my parents finally agreed to let my siblings and me have our first dog. As the youngest, I was excited to share the responsibility with my older sister, Anna. Our dog, a playful beagle named Scout, quickly became a beloved family member. Anna would walk Scout in the afternoons, and the evening walk was my duty. I remember that particular evening vividly, though the specifics of the weather and the day of the week escape me. I was about halfway through our usual route with Scout when he suddenly became fixated on something across the street. His tail wagged excitedly as he barked and pulled towards a small dog being walked by a stranger. The man, noticing our interest, crossed the street with his timid little Pomeranian. We introduced ourselves. I remember his name was something ordinary, like John. We struck up a conversation about our dogs. John mentioned he had recently lost his own beagle and had a collection of dog toys and supplies that he wanted to give away. I thought it was my lucky day. John suggested we walk to his house nearby to pick up the supplies. Despite my initial hesitation, I followed him, intrigued by the offer. We walked back to his modest, nondescript house. Scout and I entered first, led into the kitchen where John's Pomeranian scampered off into another room. John invited me to sit at the kitchen island and offered me some snacks. He handed me a bag of generic chips and stood uncomfortably close, petting Scout, who was at ease. The atmosphere felt increasingly awkward as John asked personal questions and made small talk. He even patted my knee in a fatherly manner, which made me uncomfortable. Feeling a growing sense of unease, I finally asked about the dog supplies. John excused himself to go fetch them, saying they were in the basement. I stood hesitantly by the basement door, deciding whether to go down. But then, Scout began growling at something in the dark hallway. I glanced into the dimly lit hallway and saw a figure crouching in the shadows. Panic set in, and I quickly left the house with Scout, hurrying back home. Once home, I stayed silent about the incident, feeling shaken and embarrassed. I was convinced there were two men in that house, and I narrowly escaped a dangerous situation. I never told my family, preferring to keep the unsettling experience to myself.